we are Moving Castles, a game studio for the tactical research and development of autonomous worlds. Wait a minute here. Very simply put, we build games that compose into autonomous worlds. And we build these using composable game loops. These composable game loops are small games that are fun and are released individually, but can slot together to form larger, more complex worlds. Our talk today will be about our game, This Cursed Machine, from that perspective. If you want to hear more about how Moving Castles approaches narratives, we recommend GVN's talk, the man in the orange t-shirt there, tomorrow at 11 in this room as well. So, what are composable game loops? Well, in classical games, you have several systems, several game loops that are released as one game. What we're trying to do is release each game loop as an individual game, make them composable, and together they can slot together and form an autonomous world. We think that this is, for us as a game studio, the right way to construct these larger, more complex worlds, because it combines production feasibility. We can, we're a small team. We can release them one by one. We can start building a community around them that we start developing more and more of these composable game loops with together. And we don't lose sight of the larger vision of autonomous worlds while doing so. So it's kind of best of both worlds approach for us. Our first game as part of this is called This Cursed Machine. It's a fully on-chain sci-fi horror game. It is also a composable game loop. It's a browser game, and it will be playable in the gaming corner. We're there lunch tomorrow. If you want to come by, then we're also all there. We will now show the intro of the game. I hope the sound works. And the first couple of levels. It might surprise you what this looks like. Is there a sound? Okay, so we're now in the first level of This Cursed Machine. You are the stump in the middle here who needs to achieve 101 energy, and this is done by connecting the input, the bugs, into yourself. Now we have to wait until we reach 101 energy. So This Cursed Machine always has an input and an output, and you need to achieve outputs by building a series of machines that convert the output of the input like a circuit. So our second goal is to produce piss and blood. You, the stump, are also a metabolic agent, and therefore convert the bugs into other materials. It's a production circuit game, like an open puzzle.
Yeah, and specifically, you're inside this thing that we're calling a pod, this kind of self-contained unit, which has this input here, in this instance is giving you bugs, and some output which connects to this metaphorical warehouse. And when you start playing the game, these are the only interfaces to the game that you have. You're simply going from this input here to this output. And on further levels, the complexity of the transformation required to get from the input to the output is going to increase markedly.
We will see soon what that means.
Success. Yeah,
well done, everyone. You've successfully played level number 2. Okay, so what have we done here? Well, you will see. Wait, I will open the map and you can see some of the complexity of everything. So it gets quite complex quite quickly. So you start producing more and more complex circuits to produce more and more complex outputs. The game, in relation to composable game loops, is not only a really fun game. We have people having a lot of fun with it. It is also a composable circuit loop, which converts X inputs into Y outputs. And it is a narrative that accepts other game loops to emerge that are composable with it. It's literally a composable machine. I challenge you to come up with another game loop that can't be part of this world. Find me after if you have. But composable with what, right? We have these circuits now. They produce outputs from inputs. You can construct them. There's a creative task at the center. What do we do next? How is this actually composable? Well, next thing is connecting the pods. One person's output should become another person's input, right? We want to have people be able to have orders come from other people. We want emergent problems from other players. We are also thinking about emergent material maps as a next thing. And really, we want to work much more on this game loop itself. In addition, we're already thinking about a next game loop. What if you can rip out the food dispenser and walk into the landscape, the X input changing on the tile you are on, you pooping out on the landscape what goes out of the Y output, turning into a landscape of resource competition. By having these kind of composable circuit logics, we can really plug it into different systems. And that's all from me. Agnes will talk about what we mean specifically by composability here.
So yes, hello. I've been a developer on Discuss Machine and some of the other Moving Castles games. So specifically, I wanted to talk about something that we've talked a lot about in Moving Castles, which is this idea of mechanistic composability. And I'd like to draw a distinction here between object composability, which is quite a common idea, I think, in this space, the idea that the blockchain enables you to have objects that are persistent between different worlds that can be portable, carried around. Loot is a really good example of this. It's very evocative. To mechanistic composability, the idea that you can have a physics in a world that is in fact something that can be used in another world, worlds that can interconnect in really interesting and complex ways. And the reason that we're really interested in mechanistic composability, specifically at Moving Castles, is this idea of liveness. What does it mean to really feel the presence of another world? How can that be something that you actually encounter and use in your game? And so we're kind of thinking more and more about what it means for a game mechanic itself to be portable and composable into other games. And specifically, when I first started working on this game, this was back in August, one thing we talked a lot about was how to make this game composable. And the metaphor that we picked, and it's a metaphor both in a kind of metaphorical sense, but also a mathematical sense, this is the math that underlies the way this game works, is to use the electronic circuit. So electronic circuits are made up of very, very simple building block components. You have things like transistors, resistors, capacitors. These do a very simple thing. They take X number of inputs, produce Y output according to some rule. But when you compose these things together, you get a form of emergent complexity. And one of the kind of core ways that electronic components have been composed over the last 50 to 70 or so years is in the form of something called an integrated circuit. An integrated circuit you can think of as a portable rule set, something that reliably transforms an input signal into an output signal and will take in any input signal and transform it into an output signal. Whether or not you get something interesting on the other end is a matter of circuit design. But nonetheless, it's something that is inherently composable, and this is why we've chosen it as the metaphor for this cursed machine. One thing I've definitely heard a lot in this space is the idea that blockchain games are inherently composable, and I'd like to push back on that a bit. The idea goes, well, all of the rule sets for all of the games and all of the game states are on chain, so surely everything is composable with everything else. Now, I come from the world of working with open data and open source projects, and I think the developers in this room can definitely agree that just putting some code online doesn't mean other people are going to be able to use it. It actually requires a huge amount of work, a huge amount of forethought, huge amount of kind of intention, and quite a lot of talking to other people. And one of the things that I've definitely encountered in conversations about composability in this space is the idea, well, it always kind of comes back to, we could definitely use someone else's world, the state of another world, as a way to seed RNG for our game. And yeah, that's fine, that's kind of interesting, but it's a very low bandwidth form of interaction with another world. It's a single bit of information. It doesn't really capture the liveness and the complexity of what another world is. And it's our belief in Moving Castles that really the thing to do is instead to take very simple composable designs, make small games that can fit together with the other small games that even you are making, and to use those as the building blocks for much larger and more complex worlds, and worlds that can inherit and transmit liveness between them. So the question we want to finish with is, what are you doing to make your game composable? One thing we really want to insist on is this is not the only way to do it. We're not saying this is the only composable system out there. Integrated circuits are really, really specific. But actually, I think specificity is something that's also important here. Choosing a system, choosing to follow its rules, accepting the kind of losses that come with doing that. There were compromises that we had to make in making this cursor machine. There were, in fact, a lot of compromises. A lot of golden goose was slayed along the way. You can ask us about that as well. But think about how are you setting the intentions within your project, in whatever shape or form that takes, to make this a project that is composable, not with every other project in the space, but with other things that people might want to build. But yeah, thank you.